الحمد لله ثم الحمد لله وما توفيقي واعتصامي إلا بالله عليك توكلت وإليك أنيب الحمد لله القائل وتكن منكم أمة يدعون إلى الخير ويأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر وأولئك هم المفلحون. قال الله تعالى في الكتاب المبين أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة. It is a reminder for us to embolden our faith. Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab was asked, because we are reminded in every khutbah about taqwa. There is a renewal to be in a state of preparedness, to be mindful of the challenges and tribulations to the self, to the soul, to the character, and to the community. As if you are walking in this road through a small path full of thorns. If you are careless, you are forgetful, you are surely bound to be affected, you'll be hurt. That's the essence of taqwa. We in the Muslim world, whether we are in the minority, see in Australia, or in the majority, in Syria, in many other countries, are facing tribulations, catastrophe, challenges that we have not seen in modern times. The last phase of these battles was probably in the 40s, 50s, at the time when the Muslims in Algeria, in Indonesia, Libya, fighting the Italians, Algeria, fighting the French, Indonesia, fighting the Dutch, and many battles against colonial power or imperialist power. Millions were killed by alien forces because the Muslims wanted freedom. The Muslims wanted to preserve their dignity, like many non-Muslims elsewhere. Not only Muslims, in South Africa, they're led by the blacks, who are non-Muslims, but they wanted freedom. In India, the vast majority of Hindus also wanted that freedom. For us Muslims, this is essence about the karamah of inside India. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Allah has exalted the position of Adam because they value the principle of freedom, human rights, respect, and dignity for men and women. That was why we fought. Our forefathers fought with their lives to defend not only their faith, their dignity, their country, and their society. There is an historical phase. We then observe changes. But in the last years, we suddenly saw this new upsurge. Some call it Al-Rabi' Al-Arabi. Sheikh Yusuf Khardawi said it's better to call it Thawra Sha'ab, because suddenly people just rise up to ask for what? What did the Egyptians, the Syrians ask? They asked for human dignity, for freedom, for honor, for human rights. And of course, as Muslims, we have to preserve, reassert our faith, moral and ethical values. You talk about politics or governance, you talk about freedom. You talk about economics, you talk about human dignity. You don't just enrich the few and impoverish the majority. In the United States of America, last month, we noticed a new report on the state of the US economy. From the year 2010 or earlier, for the last many years, the country has observed phenomenal growth, trillions of dollars in IT, in services industry, in banking sector, etc. But what is startling and shocking, which is relevant to us as Muslims, is that 95% of the wealth benefited 1% or less of Americans. The 95% had to suffer, not as poor as many poor in the Muslim world, but the gap, what's called the inequality, has widened. Where is the adl? Where is the principle of adl? That is why when we talk about the awakening of Islam, we come back to the essence of the Quranic message that I referred to in the early in the khutbah about the role of Muslims. If you understand and perform, you must continue to be mindful. Not talking about political systems or economic systems. You might as well start with yourself. Ya ayyuhalladzina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nar. You must start with yourself. This is basic principle, the difference between Islam and other ideologies. You don't talk about ordering mankind. You don't talk ordering society and nations. If you don't order yourself. So the issue of character, of ethics, of integrity is essential in the building up of a Muslim society. Ibda binafsik, the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You start yourself. Now, when you talk about Islamic awareness, the same principle applies. What is it? وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. That the awareness, the realization that you are a Muslim and you are expected to do, to enjoy what is good, to preserve the character and the faith. So when one is asked, what is this Islamic awareness? What is this da'wah all about? It's actually to reaffirm our faith, to strengthen our faith and the moral values, to understand what's just. And what's just is not only for Muslims, it's for humanity. There's always a lot of confusion here sometimes. When I grew up in a village, in a remote village north of Malaysia, sometimes we just take some nutmegs or fruits from nearby estates. And we were reminded, well, it's okay because it's owned by a Chinese non-Muslim. We can still love it, because after all, it is owned by a Chinese non-Muslim. You see? But the moral message here in Islam is, what is morally right or what is morally wrong has to be consistent. That is why in Muslim majority countries, we have to protect the rights of minorities. And in non-Muslim majority countries, be it Christians or Hindus in India, we must demand honor, right and dignity for Muslim minority. And in Muslim countries, they must show the example what is freedom, what is just, and not going on a killing spree like the poor and the masses and the Sham has no value in life and society. We take in my role on a lot of occasions where people invite not like even Muslims, but foreign governments or civil society or universities or think tanks. It's quite an embarrassment, because once we talk about reaffirm our faith and moral value, the principle of justice and honor and dignity, we cannot produce good examples to be emulated. The Qudwa Hasanah that you talk about, because after all, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is the exemplar par excellence. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. Now, the personality breeds family. The family breeds society and community. The society breeds nations and humankind. So we appeal to this understanding, because devoid of this understanding, you find various itijahat trends that goes contrary to that appeal. We have to deal with problems created by the few, interpret the Quran, interpret their understanding, and what is done causes so much difficulty, hardship, calamity to the vast majority of the people. Now we are fortunate, at least you, I thank the Islamic Society of Australia for giving this opportunity, helping and coordinating efforts, because it has to be done to give that clear message that we Muslims understand freedom and dignity and willing to work with other communities. I was told that in one or two mosques here, when you started, you have a party or tea party or reception and invite the community. Sometimes the surrounding community, the majority are non-Muslims. But I think that is, in essence, what da'wah and message is all about. To show your willingness to interact. Last week, there was a major conference to promote Kalimatun Sawa, common word understanding between Muslims and Christians in Rome and the Vatican, where the new Pope honored Muslim leaders too. Message is that the Christians must respect the rights of Muslim minorities as well. What should be our response? Our response should be that Islam not only calls, but Islam demands that we honor our commitment and show respect to those of other faith. This was the spirit that we need to promote, because otherwise there will not be effective change in our society. This, I made reference to the fact that now the world, from Afghanistan to Iraq to Syria to Egypt, we have tragedy after tragedy. We have reports of death after death, calamity, if not catastrophe. Now what can we do? Of course, dua is a very strong weapon. Never underestimate the power of dua and prayer. Sometimes people say, what else can we do? I remember I was 6 years in solitary confinement in the prison, and I know what the power of dua is. But more important than that is to create that awareness. The awareness. How can we Muslims living in comfort talk about the Quranic injunction of brotherhood or sisterhood, innamal mu'minuna ikhwah, and make no effort or attempt to even understand and appreciate the plight all the either Muslims in Bangladesh, or Rohingyas in Burma, or the 100,000 killed or slaughtered in Syria, and the continued discrimination or hardship inflicted on the people of Egypt. We must make our voice heard in a reasoned manner. We have to appeal to our friends, Muslims and non-Muslims, particularly in a country where we are the minority, to appreciate this. But of course, through understanding and reasoned discourse. In the last years, many Muslim scholars, ulama, have promoted. I remember Marhum Sheikh Muhammad al-Ghazali, very noted, learned scholar, encouraged us to revive what is called the Torah, the Islamic legacy. And for those younger Muslims, I would appeal to you to take note of this. We cannot be talking about da'wah, about change, about Islam, without understanding the core of the message of Islam and our legacy. We have our own legacy, our own strength, and what governance is all about, what basic principles and fundamentals of Islam is all about. So they have now asked us to revive, because everybody talked about Sharia, about Islamic law, about hudud, but we must start by the pillars of faith and the maqasid of the Sharia. Because in every change, we have to understand what is the higher objectives of change. What is the higher objectives of the Sharia? So, if you look at the political development or economic development, remember two instances that I alluded to. One, the turmoil in the Arab world. It's more than the turmoil, it's a catastrophe now. When hundreds of thousands of people are killed, it's not just a turmoil, it's massacre. Second, the example of inequality, economic inequality in the United States. Can you say it's not modern? It is modern. Can you say it is not IT-centric? Yes, it is IT-centric. Can you say it is not sophisticated? Yes, it is. But what is lacking? The ethical, moral dimension. If you understand Islamic economic in terms of maqasid Sharia, then you realize you cannot grow. You cannot promote growth and at the same time promote hardship to the poor. You cannot talk about vast economic enhancement and development and yet you condemn the poor to suffer and you enrich the few. Because the few have influence in the capital cities of the world. And the vast majority can be given $100 and vote the following elections. So that makes it a mockery of elections or democracy. And for country that I come from, I understand a bit better than your experience in Australia. But my central message here is understanding both the two poles. One is the downtrodden catastrophe in the Middle East. Look back to Islam and the maqasid of the Sharia. That there is no modernity, no change, no Islam without honoring the principle of freedom, respect, human dignity, freedom of conscience, and the rule of law. That is terribly lacking in our society. And in the case of the inequality report, that 95% of the wealth managed to benefit only 1% of the population. They're all trillionaires, multi-billionaires. But the masses see hardly any change. In fact, there is still abject poverty. There is no access to good public health program in the United States. That you can see the debate between the President and the Republican Party right now. That is the problem, inequality, and we have to relook at the maqasid of the Sharia to understand that yes to development, yes to growth, yes to technology, but no to injustice, no to abject poverty, and no to continued inequality in the name of economic justice. So let us then remind ourselves, after all, we just talk about sacrifice. The last 3 days is nothing but sacrifice. And they say finally, what is sacrifice are the cows. But this principle of sacrifice is to alert and make us aware. But you know, in our societies, I think ultimately, I don't know, hundreds and thousands of cows sacrificed, and the next year we sacrifice, and the following year we sacrifice. But ending in enjoying good food, but not the spirit of the Qurban or the sacrifice. That is why in Islam, very basic principle in the da'wah, we are always reminded of the verse, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, istajibu lillahi walirrasul, idha da'akum lima yuhyikum. That calling to enjoy good. I mean, everybody talks. The most corrupt leaders who talk about fighting corruption. The murderers in our society among the leaders, they talk about rule of law. So, in Islam, it is just not calling to enjoy, to understand values, understand and they need to follow the injunction of the Quran and the Sunnah, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But also the test is إذا دعاكم, to promote, profess, appeal and da'wah. لما يحييكم is actualization of the idea, is the practical application. The great Palestinian scholar, Marhum Ismail Farouqi, referred to the actualization of an idea. It's not talking about ideas. It's how you actualize, make it work and happen in your character, in your daily life, in your family, in your community. That is the test. إِذَا دَعَاكُمْ لِمَا يُحْيِيكُمْ. And that must be at least a reminder, a major essence of the message. Because otherwise, people, you are not, here, I don't think the issue of freedom or dignity or sacrifice is not unfamiliar. It is a familiar tone. But what is lacking to us all is the actualization of the idea. In fact, there's other verses that actually not only remind or condemn. That's a stronger denunciation of those who appeal but do not mean to apply those principles in their daily life. Let us then take note of this sacrifice in the last few days, and let us make sure that in our community, particularly in countries where Muslims are a minority, do it. I had this fortunate experience of teaching in one of the premier universities in Washington, D.C. many years back. Of course, Muslims are the minority. But coming from a Muslim majority country, working in many Muslim majority countries, and seeing the vast opportunity, the freedom you enjoy, the knowledge you can aspire to have, the experience, the exposure in countries like Australia or United States, with all the problems that we can refer to, is remarkable. If only Muslim communities in these minority countries can come up, be very strong voice, I tell you, it will put shame to Muslims in many minority countries. The way you organize, the way you manage your mosque or your businesses, because of the freedom you enjoy, because the exposure and interaction with the experts in various other fields among non-Muslims in your society will allow you to excel. What is Islam in terms of practice? Is striving for excellence. In the maqsood of the hadith Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam of itqan fil amal. It's just not amal, it's itqan fil amal. It's an achieved level of perfection. And here, Muslims in South Africa, South Australia, Muslims in the United States, we have strong views over the foreign policy of the United States. This is a separate subject. But the Muslims have the freedom. The Muslims can freely have a reasoned discourse, an exchange. You don't need to get a permit to give a khutbah this morning, this afternoon. It's not usual in many societies, including the society I come from. You can enter the university and engage in the debate. It's not where I come from. I can't do that. Now, therefore, utilize it to the best of your ability, with the best of intentions, to enhance the position of the Muslims. And may Allah reward you and give you that strength to promote that sort of a mission that will be exposed and learned and shared by many of our Muslim brothers in Muslim majority countries. Because other than the turmoil, what you see underdevelopment, you see endemic corruption, you see political persecution. Is endless. بارك الله لي ولكم في القرآن العظيم ونفعني وإياكم بما فيه من الآيات وذكر الحكيم وتقبل الله مني ومنكم. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم ولسائر تلاوته إنه هو السميع العليم. واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.